The truth is, I serve as part of the Salvation Army, and I am a proud lesbian.
The Salvation Army loves me just like I am.
No one's trying to change me. No one's tried to convert me.
One of the frameworks of the Salvation Army is social justice.
I feel like it was built for me.
Welcome to the Enemies Within the Church podcast. The Enemies Within the Church podcast is, of course, a ministry of Enemies Within the Church, and you can find out more by going to EWTCnews.com. Once again, that's EWTCnews.com, and there you can find all of our latest articles. You can find out all of our podcasts. You can find anything that you want. And of course, you can click on Buy the Documentary up at the top right-hand side, and you can buy the documentary Enemies Within the Church, which would make a great Christmas present for all of your friends. Kyle, who is it better to give Enemies Within the Church to? Your friend who, has had their head buried in the sand and they are completely ignorant of what's going on in culture, or that woke aunt that you have? Which one would it make a better Christmas present for, or should you just do it for both?
I mean, you could very much do it for both. I think out of the two, you're going to have more positive, chance of positive change with the one who's just got their head buried in the sand, because it'll hopefully show them, hey, there is actually something going on and you need to look into it. Now with your aunt, I would personally encourage you, probably going to be more successful if you're just talking to her one-on-one, because it sounds like she's got more things you need to deal with.
That's probably true. Although I do have a woke aunt, and so she might just be getting Enemies Within the Church for Christmas. You just never know. So sometimes it's fun, just to put a little note of something in there of like, see, I told you I was right, and then just send that out.
My goodness.
If you need good ideas for Christmas gifts, let me know, because I've got some great for Christmas gifts, especially for your woke relatives and your woke friends. If you have any, let me know. But anyway, we're not here for a Christmas list, although maybe we should do an episode on that sometime. Today, we're talking about, do you hear that? Do you hear that off in the distance?
I do.
It
sounds like bells.
It does sound like bells. We're here to talk about that organization that stands outside of every storefront this time of year and rings the bell, none other than the Salvation Army. Now, Kyle, we've done a lot before on the Salvation Army. We've talked about this before, and if we're talking about them a lot, is that a good sign or a bad sign?
It's generally not a good sign. Now, we want to obviously highlight success stories, but the nature of the beast is, if they're being talked about a lot, it's probably because things are not changing.
That's right. But that's not necessarily always been the case for the Salvation Army. Do you want to tell us just a little bit about, the Salvation Army's foundation and where they started and where are they now?
Well, they were founded in the United Kingdom, 1865. They're founded by a couple who were moving out of a Methodist denomination, and they were, at the time, it really was a focus. So there's probably one point of clarification. If you didn't know, the Salvation Army is a church. It's a denomination.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a organization.
Right.
But even for all the good they did, because they did focus a lot of good works, a lot of good things. The Salvation Army that we know today, in regards to, the idea in your mind of the bell ringers, of the charity, of the stuff like that, that's always been their mission. That's always been what defined them. But even from the beginning, there was a hint of over-focus on that.
Yeah.
Over-focus on the physical, lacking on the spiritual. And that seed that was planted in the early, the foundation of the Salvation Army took root and blossomed into something disgusting in modern times, where they've slipped into the worst mud of wokeness, of social justice, of all of this cultural Marxism, all of this garbage. As you saw little bit we put right at the beginning of the episode, and we're gonna get to that because it's not good.
No, it's not good. And Kyle, when they started off, they had those 3 S's. They were all about what was it? Supper or soup, soap, and salvation. Finally, is that kind of what they were about?
Yeah, I mean, that's comes straight from the founder's mouth himself.
Yeah.
And it makes you very good to see that even though they had 2 of those S's being physical needs, that the spiritual need was there as a core identity.
Mhm.
We're going to clean these people up, feed these people, and give them the gospel.
Right. And there is a lot of good stuff, but you can see definitely throughout the years, definitely all throughout our lifetime, their focus has been a lot more on the soup and the soap and not much on the salvation, even though ironically their name is Salvation Army. And for being a denomination, they don't necessarily keep a strong purity in who they have working for them in things of that nature. It's become a lot more of a charitable social services as opposed to a true church that is focusing in on glorifying Jesus Christ and honoring him and things of that nature, which is, of course, how they've fallen into all of this woke stuff in this woke ideology that they've gotten into. And it's kind of interesting because, they don't even shy away from using that term, social justice.
No, they do not. They have one of the arms of the Salvation Army is the International Social Justice Commission. You can't get more on the nose than that. Now, you could argue, and people have, that, well, just because they're using the phrase social justice doesn't mean that they're defining it the way that a woke person would. That a person, they might be defining it differently, and we'll show you the evidence. We'll look at that.
Mm-hmm.
But this International Social Justice Commission is the Salvation Army's representative to the United Nations. They're directly involved with the United Nations, not peripherally. They were a founding, I forget the exact term, but like founding charitable organization of the United Nations, and they work directly with them in carrying out different social agendas.
Which obviously means that they're going to somewhat be into globalism because that is what the United Nations is all about, and is really promoting that whole idea of globalism. And so you do have that the Salvation Army is somewhat behind that concept, but it is a little bit interesting that they would be right there with and involved in the United Nations. But is their involvement, maybe let's maybe it's this way. Maybe they're there as a mission field and they're out proclaiming, as a firebrand, fire breathing preacher, just going and proclaiming the biblical truths. Is that what they're doing at the UN?
Well, first, if you honestly believe that, they'd be able to do that and not get kicked out,
yeah,
I can't help you. But no, that's not what they're doing. They're promoting and a partner of, not just promoting, a partner of the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, which you can look those up and go read them. They're not friendly to a biblical worldview.
No.
They're not friendly to Christians. They're not friendly to good things.
They are friendly.
They're pushing
to the Green New Deal, though.
Yeah, they're friendly to that. They're also friendly to genocide.
Yep.
Friendly to abortion. But maybe that's something we should talk about, though. What is the Salvation Army's position on abortion?
Yeah, because
if they're supporting the Sustainable Development Goals, if they're supporting all these other UN programs, What is it there?
Yeah.
Are they rebelling against that?
No, they're not. But I think this is a good place to really start and look at this, because a lot of times maybe I don't know, the lesser woke is what I would go and say. The woke that they're still woke, but like they're trying to appeal to the non-woke. They're trying to appeal to conservatives to peel them away. They're trying to find some synthesis. A lot of times they'll start off and they will actually state things like they're pro-life, and then they'll start to redefine a little bit of what pro-life means, maybe add in some things that you're not so sure about, but they're at least at arm's length, somewhat against abortion somewhere along the line in some way. But that's not really how the Salvation Army is, because this is something that I think that people need to understand. The Salvation Army is not just like, oh, they've put one foot into the woke agenda. They've gone to the deep end. They're swimming in the deep end of this woke agenda. There's really not a woke thing that they haven't super gotten into. But they do off with a strong abortion statement. They say, we believe that life is a gift from God, and we are answerable to God for the taking of life. But where do they go from there, Kyle?
Well, let's continue on with some of their quotes on this. Reliable diagnostic procedures have identified a fetal abnormality considered incompatible with survival for more than a very brief postnatal period. And what's the context of what they're saying here? Well, they're saying that it's okay to get an abortion in that case. If for some reason there's something wrong with the baby and there is I don't know what a low chance of survival and brief period of time postnatal is, but some arbitrary amount of time, some arbitrary limits, you're allowed to kill the baby, not even give him a chance, just kill him. That's not very. How do you square that up with your answerable for taking of life?
Yeah, well, they continue and confirm the direction that that we're pointing at here when they go and they say rape and incest are brutal acts of dominance, violating women's physically and emotionally. This situation represents a special case for consideration of termination, as the violation may be compounded by the continuation of the pregnancy. And now I just want the viewers to think this through. They're going and saying because someone was sinned against, someone had a crime committed against them, because there's no doubt that idea of rape, and in the sense that they're talking incest, which would include rape, in that they're going and saying that because that happened, because you had a crime committed against you, you now have the right to commit a crime against a different person, and not the one who committed the crime against you, but someone completely different altogether. This would be the idea of going and saying, look, because you got scammed, you have the right to now go to your child's savings account and steal their money.
Yeah, that's not how it works. That's not how it works. They treat, and this is a pretty common thing, but they treat the mother as more of a human than the child. The child's life is only a life in the Salvation Army's eye until it's inconvenient. Once it's inconvenient, it's out of there. And I mean, they talk about like, oh, here are all the complex reasons that women seek abortion. It's like, wait, I thought you were talking about your position on abortion. Why are you talking about, oh, here are the complex reasons? Like, step one, we need to get our terms straight, and you already failed on that. And now you're trying to make it all, you're just confusing the issue. But Sam, I mean, so they've already got a very confused view. But again, who are they partnering with, promoting their
Well,
agendas?
they're promoting the agenda of the United Nations. The Salvation Army, they work with the UN and they work with them to end the structural issue of decision making on sexual and reproductive issues, and to ensure the universal access to sexual reproductive health and reproductive rights, which of course that's all code name for abortion, which is,
Yep. And if you, I mean, you
it's
can
not even
go,
really code
we
name.
have all this documented on we have a documented on an article on our website. You can go find it. It's going to be linked below. It has links to the UN's positions on these things, and it'll spell it out even more clear. Like it'll use the
Right.
terminology. It'll say abortion. So you can, but that requires, again,
Yeah.
more reading. We encourage you to go do that, verify
Right. And
things.
and this is important, I think, to understand too, because one of the things that you brought up, Kyle, that they're saying is something that our listeners are going to hear and hear more and more often as people try to muddy the water when it comes to abortion. And that is that, abortion is a complex and complicated thing. That's what they always go and try to say. This is a big argument that they're trying to have. In fact, recently I just argued with ChatGPT about this and finally beat ChatGPT in an argument on abortion. But
What?
but the whole context of what it kept saying was that, well, it's complex, and I kept going, it's not complex. It's not complex. Scientifically, this child is a human. You're trying to go and to bring excuses in going and trying to bring excuses that fit your convenience. And you're trying to complicate the issue. But the issue is pretty simple. The child is alive, and to forcibly take the life of somebody is what's called murder. That's by definition what it is. It's not that
Yeah.
complicated. But the Salvation Army, not only do they partner with the UN, they partner with the UN to promote abortion. They fail on the life issue. They're woke on life, which means that they are pro-death. And what else do they fail on?
Well, we're going to cover a couple more here. We're going to move into how they promote critical race theory. But there's even more than that. If, again, go read the article. We have other topics that we're going to be skipping over. But yeah, they promote critical race theory. Don't believe us? Let's look at let's look at their words. Now, this comes from their position statement on racism. And they define racism. Racism also refers to political or social programs. Wait.
What?
So I can be slow sometimes, Sam. That kind of sounds like they're saying that racism is not, or not always, acts upon individuals, but is
Systemic?
more than even just systemic.
It's
Is this idea.
Yeah. It also refers to political or social programs. Without, boy, that's quite the broad brush. That's the, isn't it interesting, because they do have leaders who come out and they say we don't promote critical race theory, but then they come out and they say this, which strongly implies that racism is not, or not only perpetuated by racists, but by the system.
Yeah. I mean, hold on. Maybe they're talking about like Jim Crow laws or something like that. Let's see if they can define this a little bit more clearly. Racism is not only the result of individual attitudes, but can also be perpetuated by social structures and systems. Social structures. Okay. Sometimes racism is overt and intentional, but often it is not. Okay, so now we're in the realm of implicit racism, not explicit,
Right. It, it, and
which
and they go and they say sometimes, so it's these social structures. Sometimes it's overt, sometimes it's not. What are they getting at? They're saying that you're a racist and you don't even know it.
whoa. Hey, they made it clear that they were not telling white people to repent of being white. So, I mean, they're covered there, right? That's obviously not what they're. If they've made it clear that's not what they're saying, then obviously they're not saying that here. Am I wrong?
I mean they said that they weren't for critical race theory, so clearly they must not be for critical race theory. I mean, we just have to take them face value. They said it once, right?
Yeah. Okay. I can defeat you. They also say in it that science has shown, however, that there is no evidence to support the existence of biologically different human
Oh,
races.
there they are. They're not for critical race theory because they don't believe in race at all.
Yeah, they don't think that there's a bunch of different human species running around. So obviously, oh wait, it
Oh,
continues. Oh shoot. Oh come on. Okay, they can get this. Racism can take many expressions, including open hatred, indifference, or lack of care.
and
Okay,
that lack of care one's kind of interesting because I mean, racism can take many expressions, including hatred. Well, yeah, but what about indifference or lack of care? How can being indifferent about something be racist?
I mean, indifference can be ignorant at points, but
And but yeah, that
I
doesn't make sense until you put it within the context that they echo what BLM claimed, that white silence is violence.
I'm really hoping that's not what they're implying. So let's read a little bit more. Um, they say that decades of racist structures and prejudices have created intergenerational effects and disadvantages.
Well,
I don't think this is looking super good
no,
for
especially
them.
because like, what are these decades of racist structures? I mean, we don't have Jim Crow law. The law, which is the structure, by the way, that would be the structure. We don't, for decades, we haven't had these things. So what structures are they talking about? What are they talking about here, Kyle?
Well, let's continue on to their what became a little bit infamous, and we're not going to go over this whole story, but their "Let's Talk About Racism" document, which caused a big stir a couple years ago. They provide a lot of helpful definitions, and definitions that are presented positively. Hey, we're using these in this document. Here are the definitions, so you're clear. This should be useful. Definitions are important. Okay, so what is a racist? Racist is a person who belongs to a dominant or privileged group.
Now, wait a minute here, because that means that you are inherently a racist. That doesn't mean that your actions, like it doesn't matter what your actions are, you are inherently racist. It's part of who you are, which ironically is kind of racist.
Simply for being, it's very racist. But
I think my favorite one though. Are you okay if we skip around on the definitions?
Yeah. Oh yeah, go for it.
I think my favorite one though, because remember, the whole thing of they don't believe in critical race theory, and obviously that's not true. But my favorite one here is that they have a definition in this paper for whiteness. And this is their definition of whiteness. Whiteness is also at the core of understanding race in America. Whiteness and the normalization of white racial identity throughout America's history have created a culture where non-white persons are seen as inferior or abnormal.
I got a
Yeah.
question, Sam. So they defended the statement that they were calling white people to repent of being white. Um, how do you square that circle?
I think there's only one thing that you can do in a situation like this, and that is to join in with the chants of Eric Mason and say, whiteness has caused blindness of heart. That I mean, it's just
Yeah.
you don't think, just throw out rhetoric. That's how you do this, Kyle. That's the only way you square this is don't think about it, just say it. Just say it with me. Whiteness has caused blindness of heart. Sorry. I tried.
Yeah.
You're right. You can't square that.
Yep. Let me go ahead and read their definition of structural racism,
Okay.
which is structural racism is the overarching system of racial biases across institutions and society. These systems give privileges to white people, resulting in disadvantages to people of color.
So it's all about a system. This has nothing to do with personal acts of racism, of hatred, that's motivated specifically by the way that somebody looks. It has absolutely nothing to do with any normal definition of racism. It has everything to do with a systemic racism, with a systematic racism. It has everything to do with a social structure, which they're actually using these types of words. This is how they're describing
Yeah.
these things, Kyle. This is classic critical race theory.
Now, they don't use the term critical race theory by name, but they do use its brother, intersectionality, by name and provided a definition. And they see intersectionality as the belief that our social justice movements must consider all of the intersections of identity, privilege, and oppression that people face in order to be just and effective.
And by the way, there you have that concept of social justice that's being used, that phrase, and it's being used exactly in the way that the woke would use social justice, specifically with intersectionality. And this is both what we would call sacred and secular social justice. Those who are within the church and those who are without the church. This is textbook definitions of how the culture is using social justice and being social justice warriors. But this is the Salvation Army that is providing this for us.
Yeah, and there's a whole long list of other quotes that we have. And ironically, Sam, you mentioned Eric Mason. They recommend his book, Woke Church.
Of course. Yeah.
They recommend the 1619 Project, which does not shy away from its promotion of critical race theory. White Fragility.
Yeah.
Also doesn't shy away from that. Color of Compromise. They provide resources that do not shy away from
and of course,
this.
they're also are suggesting that you read James Cone with the cross and the lynching tree. They're just to kind of to throw this out here. It's woke social justice person after woke social justice person. I mean, it's almost like they watched Enemies Within the Church and they specifically found the bad clips and they were like, those are the guys we want to recommend because several of these people
Yeah.
were referenced or specifically shown in clips in Enemies Within the Church going against it. I mean, this Salvation Army, though, you go into a store. This is the tough thing. You go into a store and there you see the guy ringing the bell and you just stop and you think, man, I kind of want to be a good Samaritan. I want to help people who are in need, want to get them some soup, want to get them some soap. And maybe someday somebody will bring them some salvation. And so you just go and you throw your spare change right in that bucket. It makes you feel good. It brings back all kinds of memories, throughout the holidays of you growing up because they've been doing this for so long. But now you're finding out that, wait a minute, these guys are woke. And this is why it's important because we don't want you to financially fund and to perpetuate wokeness because it's a false doctrine. That third S has been removed. The Salvation Army is the salvation-less army. They're not about salvation anymore. But Kyle, they're not just pro-abortion. They're not just, or pro-death really with that. They're not just, pro-critical race theory or pro-racism. They're also pro-LGBTQ promotion. They promote the whole gay agenda, the whole homosexual ideology. And what are they doing with this?
What are they doing with it? I don't even know what they're doing with it. I don't know what their goals are, but my goodness.
Should we let the viewers just sit back and watch a minute of what they have to say about it?
Yes. You caught a glimpse of it at the beginning. Now let's watch the whole thing.
The truth is, I serve as part of the Salvation Army, and I am a proud lesbian.
Across our 7,686 centers of operation, you will find Salvation Army employees who identify as members of the LGBTQ community.
Being gay, being a member of the LGBT community, I don't have anything but good things to say as far as working here at the Salvation Army.
Salvation Army loves me just like I am.
No one's trying to change me. No one's tried to convert me.
Now let's look at how they handle transgenderism.
We are very culturally competent around issues of people who are transgender. We tailor the services to whichever gender they identify with.
When I was born, I should have been a girl. And I was born a boy, but I want to be a girl.
Even though I know I am a he, I feel like a she. I don't like she's. I like he's. And the Salvation Army, everyone is welcome.
She came to the safety dorm, then we were able to move her into our lead bridge unit, where she can stay there for up to a year.
That was in reference to a man, not a woman.
I went to church, and I heard this preacher preaching that Sunday morning. He said, Jesus loved all of you. The more I went, the more better I felt about myself, than knowing that Jesus loved me. But I was just turned around by the grace of God.
What does Salvation Army believe is a pillar of theirs?
One of the frameworks of the Salvation Army is social justice.
I feel like it was built for me.
I forget how bad that is after a while away from it and then go back and rewatch it.
It's bad. I mean, I like it had been a year since I'd seen it because obviously we talked about Salvation Army about a year ago, and I had forgotten that it's not just that they're about the LGB, but because a lot of organizations are there, and though it's wrong and terrible, you do become almost desensitized to it, and you're like, okay, yeah, and that's bad. But man, they're like full on support of transgenderism.
Yeah. And again, you can see there's a promotional material from Salvation Army. But before we go much further on that, this should not be surprising because those ads were made by the same ad agency that creates the He Gets Us ads and is 1/3 of running the He Gets Us campaign. And if you want to go hear more about that, you can go check out our deep dive into the He Gets Us campaign, and you will learn a lot more about that organization. But the Salvation Army, they're promoting. They're actively. It's not just virtue signaling,
right?
Because it's promoting. Hey, we are this. We promote this. We want you to be here. And are you going to hear a message of salvation? No. As one man said, no one's trying to change him. No one's trying to convert him. As another confused man said, oh, he went to a church and heard a message about Jesus loves him. And he still thinks that he's a woman.
Right.
And he doesn't want to change that. But he's so comforted by the fact that Jesus loves him. Well, neither of those men are hearing that to be clear, neither of them are hearing that God
Right.
loves them. Because if they want to get to God's love, how do you get to Sam? If you are an enemy of God, how do you get to God's love? Do you get that love first, or is there something that happens beforehand?
Yeah. You know, there's something that happens beforehand. I think this is important that we go and we bring this out because we do know that Christ first loves us. The Bible tells us that. I love him
Mhm.
because he first loved us. We understand that concept that Jesus loved us first, and that is important to understand. But the problem comes is that love does not, and it's not just, I remember you hearing this message quite a bit, that love doesn't just leave us in our sin, but it's even more than that. It's not just that the love doesn't leave us in our sin. The love of God comes and it tells us how terrible and horrible and wicked our sin is, and how terrible and wicked we are until we turn away from that sin and turn towards Jesus Christ. Because the
Mhm.
whole idea, let's talk about it. This is the Salvation Army. They're here at Christmas time. What did Jesus come to do? Jesus came, he was born to die, but it tells us in John chapter 1 that he is light, and that in him was life, and the life was the light unto men, and that light shined into darkness, and the darkness did not comprehend it. In First John chapter 1, which is almost like a brother passage or a sister passage to John chapter 1, same human author as well, so it's very similar writing styles, both talking about the incarnation here and Christ having flesh. It talks about how that God is light and in him is no darkness at all. It's this idea that Jesus comes, he puts on flesh, he's born to die, and that death that he has is to destroy the work of sin. It's to save us from our sin. It's not to save us to our sin or to allow us to sin or to just go and to pay a penalty and then we cannot do anything. No, it's to accept the punishment that Jesus
Yeah.
Christ took on our behalf, to accept that gift. It's not just that the gift is in existence, it's that we have to accept that gift. And in doing so, we turn away from our sin and turn towards Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I mean, it should be very clear that they've dropped that
Yeah.
third S, and the obsession with physical food has made them lose sight of spiritual food.
And
The obsession with physical soap has made them lose sight of spiritual soap. They're stopping halfway with
right.
everything.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
so, and you can just see even in the video that we showed, they are creating an environment that is welcoming to sin. They're creating an environment that is comforting to sin. They're creating an environment that is accepting of sin. And of course, whenever you're harboring sin, whenever you're accepting sin, making sin comfortable, and you're producing an environment that sin abounds, we know that grace is not abounding there because grace conquers sin. Sin doesn't conquer grace. And this is where they're getting things confused. They're no longer an army of God, but they become an army of Satan. It's no longer Salvation Army, it's now Satan's army that is going and marching forth as they're enslaving people in their sin.
Yeah.
That's what they're doing. It's full of irony, but it's also full of sadness. But I do think this brings up something that's important because maybe you've been listening to this and you're going, "Oh my goodness, I had no idea that the Salvation Army was in bed with the United Nations. I had no idea that they were pro-abortion. I had no idea that they, believed in all this systemic racism and CRT." And oh my goodness, now I can totally see that they are totally on the woke agenda, totally on the woke train, and completely pushing the LGBTQ stuff, even the transgenderism stuff. I mean, this is detached from reality and crazy. And you're kind of getting mad here because you're going to have to go to a store and you're going to have to hear that ring, 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 ring. Kyle, what should people do to the bell ringers?
So there's something very important to know when you're talking about bell ringers. Some of those bell ringers are just, they're homeless people or other people that are down on their luck that are being paid to be out there. Some of those people are local volunteers from organizations. Some of those are Salvation Army members themselves, or different range of things there. So don't just charge up to them and go, you are the Salvation Army, and do you know what you promote? That's not going to help anything. It's not going to be useful. And in general, I mean, if you want to talk with them about this, if you feel that you need to, ask them how they got there. Ask them, hey, are you a member of the Salvation Army? Or are you just doing this as a job or volunteering, or what is it? Have like a little bit of a conversation with them, figure out where they're at. If they're out there as a local volunteer, you might want to like, hey, do you know some of the things that they believe? And do you agree with some of these things? And here, I'd like to recommend this resource that explains it, and leave them with that. And that's the same approach I'd take with a Salvation Army member. If they're out there because they don't have anything else and they're just trying to make a little bit of money, I would not engage that person. That's not going to be a positive conversation.
Right.
If anything, I'd see if that person needs the gospel.
Yeah, bring that third S to them.
Focus on that. Yeah, bring them what they're not being given.
Kyle, I think you're exactly right on all of this. And I think the most effective way for people to go and to fight back against the Salvation Army is twofold. One, stop giving your money to the Salvation Army. It's something that I've stopped doing. I used to go in to just put my pocket change in the bucket when I would go by, because why not? They're going to help people. At least it's a net neutral. At the very least, they're going to help somebody. They're going to give them some soap and some soup. They might not give them salvation, but hey, I don't mind people eating some soup, and some people really need some soap. So but the second thing is that if you could share information like this, whether it's our article, whether it's last year's podcast that we did on this, whether it's this year's podcast, the biggest way to really make an impact is for people to understand about this. Because, if we're going to go and to realize that there is a large portion of our nation who's actually theologically against wokeness, they're against the woke ideology, and they're willing to go and to stand up against it, which we've seen that in a lot of places across the nation. They just simply need the information. They need to know that place is woke. That church is woke. And by the way, we started off by pointing this out. The Salvation Army is a denomination. What does that mean? It means that everything that the Salvation Army does, your church or a group of good churches could do, but it needs the resources. It needs you to give your pocket change to them and your neighbors to do the same as well, in order for them to make probably a much better impact. Because one thing we know is when you're not woke, your dime goes a little bit further because it doesn't get wasted in some really dumb things.
Yeah. Yeah. Amen to that. That's the place we need to be focusing. When far too often people just look at something that goes woke and they go, "Oh man, that's too bad."
Yeah.
Do something about it. Do something about it. If you want to change your city, you want to take care of people, stop giving the Salvation Army, stop giving to other charities that are compromised, and go do the work. And do the work doesn't necessarily mean you got to go out and do it all yourself. You, with your church, set something up, use your gifts in the way that they're effective, and take care of people. Oh, and at the same time, it's evangelistic. You are giving them the third S. In fact, that third S is so big, it dominates the others. Yeah, you're doing the physical care, but it's being dominated by that gospel first, gospel center message.
That's right. Absolutely. Well, Kyle, I think we've is thoroughly covered the Salvation Army as we really can here today. So I would encourage everybody to go to EWTCnews.com. Once again, that's EWTCnews.com. And there you can find our article on the Salvation Army, wherever you're listening to this too, whether it's, on YouTube, or whether you're listening to it on iTunes or Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcast at. Remember, first of all, to subscribe and give us a rating, because that's always a good thing. But also remember that in the show notes there, you'll see a link to the article. And so go ahead and check that out. Verify everything we've been saying, because we want you to see what's happening for your own eyes. But also make sure you let other people know about it. Please share this episode, not for our sake, but for their sake, and so that we can get really those 3 S's in the real way: soup, soap, and most importantly, salvation out to the people. But Kyle, where can people contact us if they have any questions?
So, like I said, we're still doing a little bit of a phase transition from Wokepedia to EWTC News and the EWTC podcast. So you can still reach us at contactwokepedia@gmail.com. Eventually, we'll be running that in concurrent with our new EWTC News email, and then we'll fully retire it a little bit after that. But for right now, contactwokepedia@gmail.com. That is also linked in the description. You can go check that out. Now, one thing I want to say, because I keep forgetting before we start recording, I still haven't come up with a new outro. If the first person to email us or comment, whatever it is, to contact us with a good outro for me, I will give them a free copy of Enemies Within the Church.
That you can, if you already have one, remember you can send it to your woke aunt, which may or may not be a benefit, but it'd still be fun, especially put that note in there that says, "Remember, I'm right." So anyway, for EWTC News, keep standing for the truth.
Oh, come on. You just said it in a way that means that I have to say something. I just said I don't have one. So I'm just going to keep talking a little bit, and the outro